Western Sydney University securing success, one of the key ambitions, one of the 6 strategic objectives is around our international standing and relations. If you look around the university, we have lots of links with all different places in the world now. What are the most important relations at the moment? Where are we trying to build relations?
Well, I think our focus, certainly for the last 3 years, has been very much in Asia. So from a strategic perspective, the university's relationships in China are vitally important to us. We're building very good connections in Taiwan and Hong Kong as well. We've had long-standing connections, of course, in those countries in various ways, but I think we're taking a much more strategic view of that now and the relationships we're building. But also, our campus in Vietnam gives us a very strong link into Vietnam, and we'd like to build the relationships there. And then into South Asia with Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, areas in which we're focusing attention. But also Indonesia is somewhere both you and I have visited, and where we're beginning to, I think, to do some very good work and attract particularly PhD students on government scholarships here from the Ministry for Religious Affairs. So I think there are good links right through Asia, which is not to say that our international linkages elsewhere in the world are less important, but from a perspective of both our collaboration with institutional partners, Asia is vitally important to us. It's our region of the world in a very real sense, and so we should have our strongest partnerships there, but also importantly to attract increasing numbers of inbound international students to Western Sydney. This becomes obviously the major focus for us.
What's our proportion of international students?
We sit at about 11% of our total load at the moment are international students. We have some interesting differences between ourselves and other universities in international, which is worth just briefly mentioning. One of those is that 11% in terms of total load is relatively low for the sector. At the moment, the average for Australian universities is about 28% of load is international, and that's growing. And some of the bigger universities with very long-standing international linkages, and some of our research-intensive universities, that percentage is climbing up towards 40%. And in some courses, it's well above 50%.
Is that too high?
I think it's an interesting question to ask about the balance between Australian domestic load and international load. And I guess the two sides of the argument, on the one hand, there is a sense that we are a multicultural country in so many ways, so that, and you see that in Western Sydney. At the moment, we're in the middle of graduations, Kevin, as you know, so you sit on stage, as you and I do, through ceremonies, and you see the wonderful multicultural nature of our student cohort from an Australian domestic standpoint without taking into account our international students. So I think on the one hand, people are arguing that as a multicultural society, large numbers of international students, relatively speaking, should be welcome, and we should embrace that. On the other side, of course, if that's dominated from one or two countries, then that can give you a different overall context to your institution. I think that needs to be taken into account in the balance. So I think most universities are looking at not simply building international student numbers appropriately, but also the balance from where our students come from. For example, not simply about students coming here and doing an entire degree program, but more study abroad. Students from North America coming and studying with us. From Europe coming and studying for a semester in a study abroad context. But just getting back to the differences, we're low relatively speaking, as I said, 11% compared to an average of 28%. But we also, we don't have the same level of reliance on any particular country. We're not as heavily dependent on China, for example, as many Australian universities are at the moment. And we do a lot of recruiting of our international students, interestingly enough, from within Australia. So students who are already here in Australia, they might have done a diploma or a foundation program, and they're looking for a university partner to continue their education, and we recruit strongly in that context. So there are differences for Western Sydney in the international recruitment context than other universities. And that, I think, is a good thing. It gives us a good base to work from.
And so that diversity is an aim. We'd like to keep that. And what sort of percentage level are we tracking to, looking to get to sector?
No, I think that would be a great challenge for us to be perfectly honest, to get anywhere near the sector average. And At the moment, we're looking to lift from about 11% towards 20% of our total load. That's interesting in the context of another conversation you and I had, and that's the nature of the domestic load situation in Western Sydney at the moment. You know, we're going through a period where school leaver and non-current school leaver load is actually in decline or static in a highly competitive market. So the domestic context for the university is quite volatile. And so in that context, I think if we think about lifting international student numbers towards 20%, that's quite a significant challenge for us, but an important one, because I think it puts us in a good position relative to other institutions in the sector, not overly dependent on international student load in a volatile market, and I think able to ensure that we get a diverse student load across the various countries that we're working with.
Can I ask you something about the students? We'll talk about some different parts of the world in a moment, but well, first of all, what do the international students say about us? We survey them regularly, I expect. Yeah. What are the good things they say about us, and what don't they like about their experience at Western?
Well, every couple of years we participate in something called the International Student Barometer Survey. So that's an international survey instrument which is very comprehensive. I think there are well over 200, I think, universities around the world that participate, and a very significant proportion of Australian universities participate in that. It provides a very detailed set of comparative data that we can use to understand where we're situated, not simply in the Australian context, but international students. International student recruitment, of course, is a global phenomenon. So in that from that perspective, we get a sense of how we compare to institutions right around the world. So that's great. So you get that international comparison. Look, I think there are many things that students look positively on Western Sydney University. I think that they enjoy their experience here. They enjoy their interaction with our academic staff. They for the size of university we are, I think there is a real sense of having that opportunity to be closer to your lecturers and to your academic staff in your program, and I think that's a positive. Certainly our facilities are highly regarded by international students. The challenges for us, though, are really challenges that are embedded in the context of Sydney. Affordability, housing affordability, transport affordability, those sorts of issues are actually comparatively challenging in Sydney. And so our students, not just our students, university students generally, are commenting on, and it's something that I know Study New South Wales, which I'm on the board of, the International Education Advisory Board to the New South Wales government's grappling with at the moment. What more can we do to address affordability generally for students? Sydney's an expensive city.
Certainly is. And from my recollection of the most recent barometer, there's very positive above sector responses on things like the experience of diversity, prayer facilities, even scientific facilities, infrastructure on campus, the academic staff, the experience in teaching. But there is concerns about affordability and also concerns about the accommodation we offer as well. And there's been some fairly stinging comments, I recall, in regards to that.
Yeah, and I think we're working very closely with Campus Living Villages who operate our student residences to ensure that they're offering not just high quality residential accommodation for students, but they're also providing the sort of social and other experiences that students expect when they're staying on campus or in proximity to campus. And that they get an Australian experience while they're here, and that they're engaging with Australian students as well as students from all over the world. Those are very important aspects of life in Australia for an international student, and we need to ensure we're doing more and more of that.
When you speak to staff and you talk to them about international students, some staff, less than used to be the case, I have to say, will complain about academic literacy levels in international students. And the challenges that poses to teaching them, misconduct issues, placements. Do you have a view on this? Is there an issue with academic literacy amongst international students at Western?
No, I don't believe there is an issue, not to the extent that you're characterising it. I don't believe it is. I think if you look across the sector over the last 25 years, and I think it's worth keeping in mind that international education on scale in Australia is about 25 years old. So we've had, although we have a long history with the Colombo Plan and other initiatives, they were boutique compared to the huge numbers of international students that come inbound to Australia into higher ed every year now, over 300,000 students a year out of 1.3 million. So that gives you a sense of the size of the international student cohort. And I think that academic literacy issues are of concern across the board for universities in Australia. It's not simply about one particular cohort or one particular group and levels of academic literacy. In the Australian context, we need to accommodate some of the challenging educational circumstances of our students coming into our programs, whether they're coming in through the pathway programs of the college or directly into the university. We, as a major Australian university, need to provide the scaffolding, the academic scaffolding that supports students, and that's true for Australian domestic students as it is for some of our international students. But by and large, I think our international students are very high quality, and I think that the support they're getting from our staff around academic literacy, and of course the other aspect of that, English language support that students will need, not simply that they've reached the appropriate IELTS level when they're coming in, but then while we're here, we continue to support their language skills as well as their academic literacy skills. But I'm confident that, from time to time issues might arise, but by and large, I think we're both doing well in managing and assisting students, domestic and international students, and I think by and large we've got very good students coming in.